For those of you visiting with us, we're going through the whole Bible. It's called The Story. If you look on the front of your program, you'll see this crown, and then below it, kind of the crown of thorns. And a number of churches have gone through this, and I thought, well, this would be just pretty good for us to do. Because what we're finding is that in a 31-week period, we'll go through the whole Bible. Now, I can preach the whole Bible much faster than that. It's just not quite as focused on different people, but I could put the whole Bible into one sermon very easily, and have done that before. But we hope to get into a little bit more, not as in depth as what happens when we have Danny teaching us in our Sunday school class. But we started, you're getting ready, Fred, for, is it number 7 or 6? No, 7, I think it is. What you're doing tonight?
It'd be the one.
It'll be next week,
right.
Which means this is the 6th week of it. I forgot to look and make sure exactly what week we're in. But we've gone through an awful lot, starting with Adam and Eve, and we went through Abraham and Moses, had three messages on Moses, and now today we get into the new area of Joshua. And I want to remind you of something too, something that we talked about a few weeks ago. And it's very important for us to understand this, that there is an upper story and there's a lower story that goes on in all of these things. The upper story is, well, let me deal with the lower. The lower story is the one that we deal with every day. And when we talk about Moses, and this is what Moses went through, that's a story that all of us could see and understand and feel very good about, because that's on our level. The upper story, on the other hand, is God's story. That's what's going on in His mind and what He is looking down at and seeing us and knowing how to do different things to make things work the way that He wanted. And it's very important to understand that there are 2 levels of stories going on. And when we begin to see things from God's angle, it makes a huge difference. Then all of a sudden, when something bad goes on in our life, we don't necessarily count it as bad. We count it as an opportunity. We count it as something that God has given to us, maybe to learn a new lesson, or maybe it's something bad going through our lives that what is happening is God is really letting this happen so that people around us will see how we react and can make a difference in their life. So it's really interesting when you begin to understand it from God's viewpoint. If we don't see that, then life can become very tedious, it seems like. So this morning we're going to start in with Joshua, and this message is entitled, "The Battle Begins," because up until this time, God had promised the Israelites a place, and now we're down to the point of bringing them in. Last week we talked about as Moses had led the children of Israel, and they wandered in the wilderness for the 40 years, and then he brings them up to the point of entering into the promised land, but God had already told Moses that he couldn't go in. He took him up on Mount Nebo so he could see the land. He could see all the stuff that land had that the Israelites would possess, but he would not be able to go into the land itself. And Moses died at this point. God took his life and God buried him. And no man knows where God buried him, which is a good thing, because we would go back and worship him. That's the way we do things, it seems like. So now we've got the children of Israel there at the Jordan River at this point of wanting to go in and possess the land that God had promised now for about 600-700 years. Let me show you this. This is very interesting as we go into Joshua, the first chapter. First 5 verses says, "After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant is dead. Now then, you and all these people need to get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land that I'm about to give to them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert of Lebanon and from the great river of the Euphrates, all the Hittite country to the great sea on the west. No one will be able to stand up against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you." Now, you can see how I've emboldened some of the print change the color in some others. I am about to give to them this area. I will give it to them. That was kind of interesting. I'm going to give this to you guys. Understand that? Now, you're going to have to do some things for that, but I'm going to give it to you. And I will give you every place. Now, this statement really caught my eye. I will give you every place that you set your foot. Wouldn't that be neat? Wouldn't it be something if we could go to some place and as we walk through it, claim it. This is ours. And that's what God is saying to the Israelites. I will give you every place that you set your foot. He's saying that to Joshua now as he's leading. And it's very important because the changeover from Moses being the leader to now Joshua being the leader, the people had to develop a trust in Joshua like they had trusted Moses somewhat. There was times where they didn't trust Moses, if you remember. But they really allowed Moses to be that leader. And now here's Joshua. Do you remember where he came to be known? You remember what that was about? It was 40 years before this. And the Israelites were encamped on the southern border of the Promised Land. And God told Moses to send 12 spies, one from each tribe. And one of them was Joshua. The other was Caleb. Those two that came back with a positive response. Yeah, it's a great place. There's gorgeous stuff there. The vineyards are just full of such huge ripe grapes and all this kind of stuff. But they're tall people and they're big people, and the 10 said, we'll never be able to overcome them. And Joshua and Caleb said, yes, we can, because we have God on our side. So Joshua was the one who then became like second, Moses second. And he now is the one who's going to lead. And at the end of this, he says, no one will be able to stand up against you all the days of your life. And as I was with Moses, so I'll be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. That's God's promise. I will never leave you or forsake you. And so as we get into the book of Joshua here, this hopefully will help you to get an understanding of what's going on. The battle begins, and the very first thing I want you to see is Joshua tells the people how to succeed, be successful. It's very important to be successful. When God is guiding and directing, it's very important for us to have the success there that he wanted us to have. And so he wanted to show us how to have that success. If we go on down to Joshua 1:8 and look at that scripture, he says, do not let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. This reminds me of a verse out of James. I don't know if you've thought about it, but in James, as James is writing, he says, be ye doers of the word and not just hearers only. But that, in essence, is what's going on here. He says, do not let the book of the law depart from you, from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. That's the key. Now look at this. And the people need, all of us today even, need to be people of the book. And the book I'm talking about is the Word of God, the Bible. We need to be a people who look at this book and think, you know, this right here has so much information in it that is more important than absolutely any other book on the face of this earth, the things that are written here. What is given here makes the difference between somebody dying and being in hell for eternity, or somebody dying and being forever with God. That is why this book is so powerful, and we need to be people of the book. We need to have this and have it on our minds and to know it. Do not let this book of the law depart from us. And the second thing he says here that he talks about is meditating on it day and night. The need of us getting into his word and learning it, memorizing it, and putting it into our hearts so that if we're in a situation where we don't have it, we have the words that are there that we've memorized that make the difference because we've believed in them and we've seen in the past how it all works. So to meditate on it day and night. It's not just a book that we take home and put it over on the shelf and let it get dust on it. We deal with it in that fashion. But it's something that we deal with constantly. And we're looking at it, and we're studying it, we're letting it become a very part of our being, a very of the very fiber of our being, is the words of God. I think I've told you about when Jody and I first started dating. This was 51, 52 years ago. We started dating just before Christmas, and after Christmas, then she couldn't keep her hands off of me. And just, she couldn't wait to get back after Christmas break and just have a good time with me, And so when we got back, I called her. I said, "Hun," I said, "Jody, do you want to see me again? And do you want to see me again?" "Yeah, I want to." We spent that spring getting to know each other, and there wasn't much question in my mind but what she was the gal for me. I want a gal just like the gal that married dear old Dad, as we sang. And that's what I saw in Jody. Well, everything went well until coming down to the end of May, and then we had to make some decisions. And the decision we made was that she was going back to her mom and brother and sister in Wichita, and I was going back to my parents in Sedalia, Missouri. And we would have 300 miles in between us, which wasn't too much fun. But if you haven't noticed this, that Jody's a letter writer. If we sit down in the evening in front of the TV and we're watching TV, and I look over there at her, and she is constantly writing something. She's on a first-name basis with the people at the post office. They know her. They know all her ins and outs, everything about her, because she's been in there so many times. But every day during that summer, I got a letter from her. And I get that letter, and you know what I do with it? I take that letter, and I would get it out of the mailbox, and I'd run in my bedroom where I kept all my stuff, and I'd take that letter, and I'd lay it down on the chest of drawers in there, and put it on the stack of other letters I'd already got, because I got one every day at least. And I put it on the stack of letters, and I look, she loves me. I know it, because look at all these letters. And then I go about my business. But that's not really how it happened. I'd go to the mailbox, and every day, I'd get there as soon as I could, and I'd pull the mail out, and I'd find the letter from Jody, and I'd rip it open, and I would read it, and I would read it, and I'd take it into my bedroom, and I'd put it someplace where later on what I wanted to, I'd get it out, and I'd read it again, because this was the woman who I wanted to marry and spend the rest of my life with. Those were love letters. We've been married for 50 years, and I don't get letters much from her anymore. I do get cards. I can't share with you. Some of you are laughing, you understand. You know what this book is? This book is a love letter from our Father in heaven. This is Him writing to us and saying, "You mean so much to me, and let me show you why." And He writes this book, and He gives us all that we need to know about what it takes to be with Him forever, because He loves us that much. Meditate on it day and night. But the third thing there is, if we don't do that, we've got a real problem, and that is to put it into action. In other words, what we read in the Word, what we read in the law, we need to put it into action. And if we don't put it into action, then we've kind of messed up. Things haven't gone the way that God really wanted them to go. Does it hurt our relationship? Yeah. If we don't put it into action, does it keep us necessarily away from heaven? Not necessarily. Because the real key of our entrance into eternity in heaven with God and with Jesus is right here, what we believe about what Jesus did on the cross. Do we believe Him to be the Son of God? And do we believe that He paid the price for my sins and your sins and everybody's sins? Do we believe that? That's the key. And when we believe that, then the heart comes around to the point of saying, I want to do the things that please Jesus, who has paid the price for me, and I want to please God who has allowed all this to take place, and I want to do the things that they want me to do. So put it into action. It makes all the difference. This is, as Joshua tells the people, this is how to be successful. And he wanted them to know that as they're getting ready to go into the promised land. So here we go. The conquest begins. They're on the east side of the Jordan River. And they're looking across the Jordan, and they've got probably a couple million people. Now think about that a minute. You've got a river, and you've got a couple million people. There's no bridge. If there was a bridge, it would be a narrow, small bridge that would allow maybe 3 or 4 people abreast, to get across the bridge. And how are you going to get a million people, or 2 million people, or 3 million people across this river by a little bridge like that? It's going to be pretty well impossible. And so God then, in Joshua chapter 2 there is where we start into all this. God then shows them the crossing and how to deal with the crossing. And he told Joshua, he said, you get the priests and have them to take the Ark of the Covenant, and as soon as their feet touch the water of the Jordan, he will back it up and stop the flowing of water down the Jordan River. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. As soon as he did that, the people could cross over, and the river bottom was dry, just like it was with the Red Sea when they crossed the Red Sea. God stopped the water. Now, tales of this went through the land, the promised land. And the people of the promised land that lived there heard about what was happening with these 2 or 3 million people and what was going on with this getting across the Jordan River. It wasn't a problem for them. And they get across the Jordan, and so God does something very miraculously right there to start the whole thing. So they get across the Jordan, and they're on the other side, and then God comes to Joshua again, and he talks to him and tells him about how to take the city of Jericho. And they're supposed to basically march around the city of Jericho once a day for 6 days. And on the 7th day, they march around it 7 times. And on the 7th time, the priests and the people, there's shouting, there's blowing of horns, and by miraculous work of God, the city just falls apart. My Father in heaven is an unbelievably strong God that can do things that we never thought possible. Before all that happened, Joshua sent a couple spies into the city to see what it was like, and found, while they were there, they found a woman of the night who took care of them and watched out for them. Rahab was her name. And Rahab took care of them and helped them see what they needed to see of the city, and then protected them from the militia or the police or whatever it was in the city at that time, and got them out of the city by lowering them out a window down the wall, the outer wall of the city. And in the process of doing that, she asked for her protection for her and her family, and so they told her, you get all of your family into your place, and when the walls fall, you will not be harmed. And that's exactly what happened. The fall of Jericho was an amazing thing. God gave it to the children of Israel. Now the children of Israel are starting to feel pretty good about it. God had told them, anything that you take out of that city, it's mine. All the gold, all the silver, all the fine linens, all that kind of stuff, that's mine. Do not take it for yourself, take it for me, and that's it. And so that was the rule, that was the law at that point. Then comes the Battle of Ai. Just to the west of Jerusalem, or of Jericho, is where the little city of Ai is. And it's such a small city that Joshua said, we don't need to send all of our men down there. And they ended up just sending 3,000. And they took the 3,000 men to go to Ai because it was so small, and they figured they could win that battle with them. And when they got down there and they went into battle with them, the men of Ai just really put a whooping on them. And the Israelites 3,000 Israelite men ran back in terror. 36 of them were killed. Joshua says, what happened, Lord? What happened? Why did this have to take place? And God said to Joshua, I'll tell you what, here's what I want you to do. I want you to bring all the tribes together, the leaders of the tribes, and have them pass in front of me, and I'll tell you which tribe is important. And then with that tribe, I want you to have all of the, how is it they put it, the families. There was 4 breakdowns, if I remember right, in that whole scenario. The clans, first of all the clans of this tribe, and he then said, this is the clan. And then with that clan, they had all the families come through, and he said, this is the family. And with that family, then he had all the individual families, and he spoke up and said, it's Achan and his family. And so the people of Israel, the leadership, go into Achan's tent, and they pull the floor back on the tent, and below the floor they find gold and silver and fine linens that he had taken and brought in there for himself. And that was the reason there was sin in the camp. And that sin in the camp is why when they went to Ai, they had to turn tail and run. Boy, sin in the camp does do a lot of problems. And there's a need I think a need for all of us to do the very best we can to live without it. But if you have problems in your life, a lot of times, if you just kind of look, a lot of times you're going to see that those problems are brought on by this idea of the sin in the camp. And so when you begin to clean the sin up and get that out of the deal, then things get to be better. Achan and his family were all taken and stoned. And then they go back into battle with Ai, and the Israelites win. So it's quite a battle they go through. The southern campaign, there were 5 kings. The groups of the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, and the Jebusites are the 5 groups. And the kings of those, as the Israelites are battling against these 5 kings and their armies, Joshua realized that, hey, he was winning, but he wasn't going to be able to take care of it all if the sun goes down like normal. And so he prayed to God. He said, God, can you stop the sun from moving? Can you stop the moon and allow me to get this battle finished? And the scripture says that this happened. So it never happened before, and it hasn't happened since. But he stopped it, and with that, they were able to battle these 5 kings and win. Now, the kings themselves found themselves in a cave. They all kind of got into this cave to hopefully not be seen by the Israelites' army. And as the Israelites were coming through, they found them. And so they rolled a stone over something in front of that cave and held it and waited for the whole army to go ahead and finish the battle of that day. And when that was over with, then they came back and they took those kings, and those 5 kings then were put to death, showing the children of Israel, God is with us and he's ready to battle and to do this for us. Amazing. After the southern campaign came the northern. In the northern, there were 31 different kings that were involved in it. And one by one, they took them. And all this area then became the area that was to be the promised land. It has been marked as that. Now, if you'll notice right there, that's the Sea of the Dead Sea. And up there, that's the Sea of Galilee. And then you start looking at all the different tribes: Asher, Benjamin, Dan, Ephraim, Gad, Issachar, Judah, Manasseh. There's 2 Manassehs because Manasseh, it was the half tribe of Manasseh that was on the west side. If you'll see up there, number 8A, under that top arrow, that's the half tribe of Manasseh. And 8B, the green on the other side, is the other half tribe of Manasseh. Manasseh got a lot of territory. Then Naphtali, and Reuben, and Simeon, and Zebulun were the tribes, and it was all divided up for them. This is how the people ended up. This is where they got to be. And this promised land was what God had promised all the way back 600 to 700 years before this to Abraham. And here it is. And they have it. And it's because God made it possible. Now the third point on your outline there, 2 reasons for taking the promised land. This is, people really throw this out when they hear that you're a Christian and that our God is a God of love, and then they begin to talk about, well, in the Old Testament, God would kill people and do all this kind of, and yes, he did. And the reason is, the question is, why did he kill people is what people need to look at, and why did he do this? Why did he do these things? Well, first of all, out of Deuteronomy 12, we have, he killed them because of the wickedness of the people. The people of that land were just wicked people. Look at this. Deuteronomy 12:31 says, you must not worship the Lord your God in their way, because in worshiping their gods, they do all kinds of detestable things the Lord hates. They even burn their sons and daughters in the fire as sacrifices to their gods. Just what we talked about this morning a little bit in Sunday school. God detested them because they were such a sinful, wicked people. And it's kind of like when you go back to the time of Noah. The reason God allowed the earth to be covered with a flood was to get rid of the people because they become so wicked. And it's happening here again. And it's happening in the spot where God had promised his people to have their promised land. So the wickedness of the people is a real problem. Now my question is, do you think there's anything that they were doing that we don't have going on right now in America? I think we need to really take a look at ourselves. If we start pointing over, back to there, then look at what happens to it. We've got 3 fingers coming back at us. And look what goes on in our nation. Look at the wickedness that is there. And yet we want the blessings of God. Second, he did it because God wanted to be known among the nations. He wanted the people of this world to know that his people, the Israelites, he was blessing. He wanted them to know that he wanted a relationship with people, and that meant really all of them. He was always after all of them. He recognized that some of them were past getting to them, but he's always wanted all of us. He's not happy. He will not be happy because of some of us who will not ever give ourselves over to him. So the reasons were kind of important to understand. Why did God take the lives of all these people? Why was it God would say to a king, go wipe out this nation, every man, woman, and child, and every beast, every cow, every sheep, everything, just kill them all. And it was because of this wickedness that had entered in around his people, trying to keep them as people who really sought him. My God is a loving God. And he wants the very best for us. And when going back to the very first point here, of the 3 things to be successful, if those 3 things were done by everybody on the face of this earth, my God would be so joyful, he'd be thrilled to see that happening. Because then they would begin to understand him. They would begin to desire him. Everyone would recognize what this life is about. I don't want to take away from any of you and the things that you do, the type of work that you do, because it's all important. And God needs Christians everywhere. But for a long time, I felt like what I'm involved with is probably one of the most important things in the world, because it's bringing people to a relationship with God that's going to last forever. And it's not to put down any of you, but it's to raise up the power of my Father in heaven and what he can do. And my prayer is, Lord, let me do all I can do with what you've given me. I've told Jody that when I die, on my headstone, I'd like to have on there, I told you I was sick. And I still think that would be fun to have. But maybe underneath it, put in there, he used all of the gifts God gave him. Wow. That would be neat if that could be said. My Father wants us all. And he's not happy until he can get us all. That means he's probably not going to be happy